Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a concept you might think you know, but probably don't. The magical number 7 plus or minus 2.
Ah, yes, a classic from a 1956 paper by George A. Miller really made people think differently about how we perceive and judge information.
And we've got excerpts from that very paper, along with some extra info, to help us unpack it all. So what was Miller actually getting at?
Well, he was looking at what he called absolute judgments, our ability to categorize something, but like without any other context.
Okay, so like, if someone played a note on a piano, but you couldn't see the keys, could you tell what note it was?
Exactly. Or imagine you taste something. No comparing, you just have to say, how salty is it? That's an absolute judgment.
Got it. So what did he find out about these judgments?
This is the part that blows people's minds. Even today, we're not as good at this as we think. Yeah, he reviewed tons of experiments, different senses, hearing, taste, vision, the whole works. The results were consistent. People could only tell the difference between, on average, 6.5 categories, no matter what they were judging.
Really? So like brightness of a light, saltiness, it all hits a wall around 7.
Pretty much, yeah. Seems that there's a limit, like a ceiling, to how much variation we can really perceive and categorize when we're making these kinds of absolute judgments.
Wild. Why 7, though? What's so special about it?
Here's where we got to get a little technical, dip our toes into information theory.
Oh boy.
Don't worry, it's not that bad. Miller uses the concept of bits of information, basically the tiniest units we can use to measure how much info a message has. Like each bit is a yes or no question, cutting possibilities in half. 1 bit, 2 choices, 2 bits, 4 choices, and so on.
Okay, I see where this is going. So our brains can only handle about 7 of those bits at once.
Close, but there's a twist. Absolute judgments. Yeah, those seem limited by bits, but Miller found something super interesting when he looked at immediate memory.
You mean like holding something in your mind for a short time?
Right, short-term stuff. Turns out that's not limited by bits, but by the number of chunks we can hold.
Chunks?
Yeah, think of it like a meaningful unit of information. It could be one number, a letter, a whole word, even a familiar phrase. The point is, it makes sense together. Our brain sees it as one thing, even though that chunk might have a bunch of bits inside it.
So judging loudness, that's limited by bits. But remembering things, it's how many of these chunks, not the total amount of info.
You got it. And this is cool because it means we can kind of cheat the bit limit by grouping stuff together cleverly.
Give me an example.
Sure. Think about remembering numbers. We can usually hold about 7 digits in mind. That's like 23 bits of information. But we can also remember about 7 separate words, even though each word by itself has way more bits than a single digit.
Because we're chunking?
Chunking, it lets us get past that bit limit. It's like our brain is compressing the data.
Makes sense. So is that how, like, those memory champions do it? Memorize crazy long numbers and stuff?
Part of it, for sure. They train themselves to use really fancy chunking and recoding tricks, which we'll get into later. But it's not just for party tricks. This applies to how we learn any new concept, remember instructions, even understand what we're saying right now.
Wow. So we're all chunking, like, all the time, without realizing it.
All the time, like when you remember a phone number by the area code or break down a big task into smaller steps, chunking in action. And Miller talked about this amazing experiment that really shows how powerful this chunking or recoding can be.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about it.
So researchers, they had people learn different ways to turn binary digits, zeros and ones, into bigger chunks, like pairs, triplets, even bigger sets. And they'd give these chunks new names, basically recoding the information.
So instead of remembering a meaningless string of ones and zeros, they were grouping them in a way that made more sense to them.
Right, and the results were crazy. With practice, people could remember way more binary digits just by using these strategies. The better they were at recoding, the more they could remember.
So we're not just stuck with whatever our brain starts with. We can train it to handle more by using these chunking and recoding things.
That's one of the big ideas for Miller's work. It means even though we have limits, we're not just like passive sponges. We can change how we process and store information to get better.
That's encouraging. But we've been talking mostly about judging one thing at a time and memory. What about the real world where stuff is way more complicated?
Good point. Miller talks about that too. He says that magical number 7 really applies when we're judging one thing, like how loud something is. But when we have multiple dimensions, things get more interesting.
Multidimensional.
Yeah, things that vary in more than one way. Like think about a dot in a square. It can move left, right, and up, down, right?
So 2 dimensions. We can handle more categories then.
Exactly. Research shows that when we add more dimensions, our capacity for making these judgments goes up. People can accurately pick out about 24 spots within a square, which is way more than the 6 or 7 we see with just one dimension.
So more complexity means more brain power. But I bet there's still a limit, right?
You bet. It's not like adding dimensions just doubles our abilities. Even when judging two things at once, like saltiness and sweetness, people didn't get twice as good as just judging saltiness alone.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, so more dimensions means more we can handle, but there's a ceiling somewhere.
Exactly. And that leads to another question. What about things like faces or words or objects? Those vary in tons of ways. We can recognize hundreds of faces, thousands of words, way more than 7.
True. How does that fit with this limit idea?
Well, there's this super cool study Miller talks about. People listened to sounds that changed along 6 different dimensions, each dimension having 5 possible values.
So, a lot of different sounds.
Over 15,000 possible combinations.
Wow. How'd they do?
Amazingly, they could handle it. They could tell apart about 150 different sounds perfectly, a huge jump from the 6 or 7 categories we see in simpler judgments.
So, more dimensions can really boost what we can process, but I still feel like there's got to be a limit somewhere, even then.
Of course, even 150 is way less than the words or faces we recognize, and this is where Miller brings in something really neat: linguistics.
Linguistics?
Yeah, language. Linguists say the sounds we use in speech are different from each other because of about 8 to 10 distinctive features, like whether a sound uses your vocal cords or not, stuff like that.
Kind of like those sounds in the experiment, but for how we talk.
Exactly. And get this, when researchers used sounds that varied in 8 dimensions, but only asked for yes-no judgments on each one, people could recognize about 120 sounds.
That's pretty close to those distinctive features in speech.
Right. It seems like there might be a limit around 8 to 10 dimensions for how much we can handle at once, even when the judgments are simple. But then the question is, how do we manage language, which is way more complex than just sounds?
Yeah, we're not just identifying sounds all day. We put them into word, sentences, have whole conversations.
Right. That's where sequential processing comes in. We're not doing everything at once. It's not like taking snapshots of each dimension one after the other, then putting those snapshots together to make sense of it all.
Like our brains are juggling, but super fast.
Kind of. It's this mix of doing things at the same time and in sequence that lets us go beyond those basic judgments and handle something as complex as language.
That's amazing. So it's not just 7 after all. Our brains have tricks to do even more. This is all so cool, but I'm ready to hear what this means for us in daily life.
That's what we'll tackle next time. We'll explore the practical implications of Miller's work and how understanding these limits can help us learn, think, and solve problems better. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. Before we go on, I'm still kind of stuck on how our brains handle such complex stuff. We were talking about how more dimensions actually mean more processing power, even with those limits we discussed.
Right. That study with the sounds varying across 6 dimensions, it's pretty mind-blowing that people could tell apart 150 sounds without messing up, way more than the usual 6 or 7 we see with those simpler judgments.
Yeah, it really shows how much more our brains can do than we might think, especially when it's not just like comparing things on a single scale.
For sure. Think about it. We're constantly bombarded with information that's changing in all sorts of ways. Like even just vision, it's not just about how big or what shape something is. We're processing color, texture, is it moving, what's around it.
Our brains are taking in a whole lot of variables all the time. But if we're always hitting that 7-item limit, how do we manage?
Well, this is where that chunking power comes back in, remember? Packaging information into meaningful units.
Right, like grouping digits in a phone number.
Exactly. And it's not just for memory. Chunking is crucial for way more complex things, like understanding language or even making sense of what we see.
So like we group those digits, we're also grouping visual stuff, sounds, even ideas into these chunks to make sense of the world around us.
You got it. And that's how we move past those simple judgments and handle the really complex stuff.
Makes sense. It's like our brain's way of compressing information to deal with it all. But is chunking something we can get better at? Like, can we train our brains to be better chunkers?
Absolutely. Remember that experiment with recoding binary digits into bigger chunks?
Yeah, where they gave those chunks new names.
Right. They were basically creating new, higher-level units of meaning. And the more they practiced, the more they could remember.
So we're not just stuck with whatever chunking ability we start with. We can develop that skill. That's kind of cool.
It is. Think about expert chess players. They look at a board and just get it, right? The strategy, the whole picture. They're not seeing individual pieces anymore. They're seeing these meaningful chunks that represent whole patterns, relationships.
Like a whole new language for understanding the game.
Exactly. They've compressed that information into something their brain can process more easily. And it's not just chess. Musicians instantly recognizing chord progressions, doctors diagnosing patients. It's not just raw brain power. It's about using knowledge and experience to see the world in chunks.
So we're not just passively taking in information. We're actively changing it into something our brains can work with better.
Right, and Miller takes this even further, saying this recoding process, it's like the lifeblood of the thought processes. Not just memory, not just perception, but how we solve problems, decide things, even daydream.
Whoa. So it's not just about storing data, it's constantly playing with it, combining it, making new mental pictures.
Exactly, and this constant recoding is what lets us be flexible thinkers, jump between big ideas and details, come up with new ideas.
Okay, so if this recoding is so important for how we think, does that mean some people are just better at it than others?
That's a great question, and Miller actually suggests that these individual differences in recoding might be behind a whole bunch of cognitive skills, even personality stuff.
So someone who's really good at seeing patterns or connecting ideas that seem unrelated, maybe they're just a better recoder, which helps them solve problems, be creative, all that.
That's the idea. Think about someone who can explain really complicated technical stuff in simple ways that everyone can understand. They're not just good at memorizing, they're good at connecting different areas of knowledge by recoding.
Or a musician who can hear a melody and immediately imagine it with different instruments or a different feeling, recoding in action.
Exactly. And this ability to smoothly recode information, that could be one of the things that sets apart those truly innovative thinkers. They see connections others miss, they come up with new solutions because they're not stuck in rigid thinking.
This is making me rethink how we approach learning and education. It's not just about stuffing facts in our heads, it's about developing these recoding skills, helping people learn how to play with information, see it from different angles.
I agree completely. We need to encourage curiosity, a playful attitude towards knowledge instead of just rote memorization, especially now when we need people who can think creatively and adapt to solve complex problems.
So for our listeners who are excited to try this out, what are some concrete things they can do to become better recoders?
Great question. First and foremost, actively engage with the information. Don't just read it, question it, analyze it, and try to find different ways to understand and represent it.
Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive into this magical number 7 idea, and I gotta say this recoding thing has really grabbed my attention. Seems like a secret weapon for our brains.
It really is basically transforming information, like translating it, but not between languages, between different ways our minds represent stuff.
Instead of just storing information as it comes in, we're actively messing with it, making it, I don't know, neater, more meaningful, easier to use. We've talked around it, but can you give us a solid example of recoding in action?
Sure, let's go back to that phone number thing. You don't remember it as just a random jumble of digits, right? You probably group them by area code, or maybe there's a pattern you notice. That's recoding.
Ah, okay. So our brains are always looking for ways to organize and simplify things, to make them easier to handle.
Exactly, and it happens all the time without us even thinking about it. Learning a new language is a great example. At first, it's all new sounds, grammar rules, but you start connecting that to what you already know about language, building a new mental framework. That's recoding, bridging the gap between the new stuff and your existing knowledge.
Wow. It's crazy to think that things we do every day, like remembering a phone number or learning a language, have all this complex stuff going on behind the scenes. But Miller goes even further, right? He calls recoding the lifeblood of the thought processes. Why is it so central to thinking, in his view?
Well, think about how we solve problems, make decisions, or even just daydream. We're always manipulating information, combining ideas, figuring things out, running scenarios in our heads. All that depends on being able to recode flexibly, shifting between details and big ideas, making new mental pictures on the spot.
So our thoughts are constantly changing, like a dance of recoding, turning information into new and unexpected forms.
Love that analogy. And this is where it gets really exciting. Miller suggests these differences in recoding ability from person to person might explain why some people are better at certain things, have different personalities even.
Makes sense to me. Someone who's great at spotting patterns or connecting ideas that seem totally random, maybe they're just a master recoder. And that helps them with problem solving, creativity, all of that.
Exactly. Imagine someone who can explain super technical stuff in a way anyone can understand. They're not just good with words, they're bridging different areas of knowledge by recoding.
Or that musician who can hear a simple tune and boom, they're hearing it with different instruments, different emotions, recoding in action.
Right. It's not just about knowing a lot. It's about being able to play with that knowledge, reshape it, see it in new ways. This fluid recoding, that might be what makes truly innovative thinkers tick. They see connection others miss. They come up with new solutions because they're not limited by the usual ways of thinking.
This is really making me think differently about education. It shouldn't just be about memorizing facts. It should be about teaching these recoding skills, encouraging people to experiment with information, see it from all angles.
Absolutely. We need to nurture that curiosity, that playful approach to knowledge, not just thrilling facts, especially now when the world needs people who can think creatively and adapt to solve complex problems.
So for our listeners who want to put this into practice, how can they get better at this recoding stuff? Any tips?
First, be an active participant in learning. Don't just passively take in information. Question it, break it down, and look for different ways to make sense of it.
So instead of just reading a textbook, maybe try summarizing it in my own words, drawing diagrams, explaining it to someone else.
All excellent ways to practice recoding. Don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions, to take things apart and put them back together in new ways. Try different learning strategies, see what clicks for you.
We need to become more aware of how we're processing information, not just taking it in, but actively shaping our own understanding, like becoming architects of how we think.
That's a fantastic way to put it. And yeah, we might have limits on how much we can process at once, but recoding helps us break through those limits. It's how we keep learning and growing.
That's a really empowering thought. So the big takeaway from this magical number 7 exploration isn't about getting hung up on that specific number. It's about appreciating how amazingly flexible and adaptable our minds are.
Couldn't have said it better myself. By understanding these principles, we can become better learners, thinkers, problem solvers, and develop that mental agility we need to thrive in a world that's always changing.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us. To everyone listening, keep those minds churning and those recoding skills sharp. Until next time, happy learning.